Well, I've been wanting to play around with fiberglass for a while. I got some old polyester resin, some acetone, and some epoxy right there. And I wanted to try it on Tyvek and see what happens. Also, I have a piece of cotton cloth, and I'm going to attempt to thin the resin and see how it works on these cheaper than glass products. Then I'll test them when they dry for strength and stuff. And, actually, I'm just making a mess. Well, I ran into my first problem. The resin, like I said, is old, and it's reacted with itself and turned into a unpourable goo. I think there's some at the bottom. Maybe I'll be able to get it out. Well, as I showed, I had a problem with the polyester resin. Did my best. Just splashed some acetone in it to thin it, and then I painted some Tyvek and a piece of old khaki pants. So we'll see if that's actually going to dry. It might not, being old resin. Oh yeah, and you put the hardener in too. I put hardener in. That's really old hardener too. So, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen. It might just not work at all. Might not harden. This Tyvek with polyester on it, and it might harden. I don't know. It was old resin. This one's not hardening. This is foam on the back, dollar store foam, and this is a piece of Tyvek which I epoxied, mixed with a little bit of alcohol, make it real thin, and painted it on the foam and on the back of the Tyvek, and then painted it on top. But it was wrinkled and it didn't sit flat, and then this experiment does include vacuum bagging and all that stuff. And here's some khaki pants material. Once again, painted the foam, painted the khaki, flipped it on, put it on, and then soaked it on the top. Here's a flatter piece of Tyvek, which I did likewise, put a lot of thinned epoxy resin. This is just a piece of Tyvek, which I put the resin on and experimentally just put a stick on there to see what would happen. And here another experiment, very crude. Took the piece of Tyvek and epoxied painted one side of it and then rolled it very crudely. No form or anything, just to see what would happen, what the strength might be on that. And here last is a piece of khaki material with just the painted on epoxy. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens when it dries. I don't have high hopes for the polyester stuff. I'm just going to have to throw that can out, I guess. And I didn't try the polyester acetone mix. Oh, I thinned the polyester with acetone. I didn't try that mix on the foam because, of course, it would eat the foam away. That's, the polyester is cheaper, but you can't put it directly on foam. Oh well. And that's my wife's project over there. She's cleaning this thing up. Got some goo on it. And we're sitting outside my tarp in the driveway. So it's a humid, hot day, and I'm having a ball. All right, I guess I painted this stuff on around 2 in the afternoon, maybe 1:30, and it's now 7. So it's at 5.5, 6 hours. The regular fiberglass, poly, whatever it is, it was old, as you remember, and it didn't harden at all. It got a little more sticky, and but it wasn't good. It didn't work on the Tyvek or on the piece of cloth. the epoxy mixed with alcohol, it has hardened somewhat, probably do better overnight. And the piece that wasn't stuck real well to the board, it's formed like a glossy finish, and it does pull away from the foam, but you really have to kind of rip the foam to pull it away. So it's kind of a good bond, although it wasn't pressed on. The khaki pants cotton, it's glued on fairly well. I mean, you could rip it off, but once again, you're tearing the foam apart. And oh yeah, and this has a fairly glossy finish. It's kind of nice. It's soaked into the fiber, so it's still kind of like a fiber finish. And this was the piece of Tyvek, as was this. This is Tyvek. This Tyvek, which was a little hard, pressed a little harder, is a little flatter on the foam, and it's stuck really well onto the dollar board foam, which is the thin foam you can make signs out of. It's usually covered with paper. The paper is off, by the way. So, but you can see that's kind of a shiny surface, and it's fairly nice. I think with putting a little less alcohol in and a little more epoxy, that would have gotten really hard. Now, the roll here first. Here's the piece of cotton khaki pants leg that I put the epoxy on, and I think it's going to harden a little more overnight. That was a slow cure epoxy, but it's kind of got an interesting, kind of flexible, but it's stiffening. And it's a little bit translucent. You can't see that, but you can see the light through it. And kind of interesting. Once again, I think if you were to put a little more epoxy in there, that would have gotten really hard. This is the piece of Tyvek that I put the stick on. It's just Tyvek, and it was only coated on one side. And it's gotten a little stiffer. Tyvek's just a little bit stiff anyway, but once again, a little less alcohol, a little more epoxy, I think that would have gotten hard. And you see it's got a shiny glaze to it. Now the stick fell off once before, and you could just pull it right off. There wasn't a whole lot of epoxy in there. You can see it's not even coated, and it didn't coat the stick. So once again, I think a little more epoxy there, it would have stuck real well. Now if you remember the tube I made, it's kind of flexible, but, and I guess I could unpeel it. It takes a bit of force to get it unpeeled. Yeah, a bit of force, but once again, a little more epoxy, less alcohol in that. It would have been harder to spread, but this, you could actually form shapes with Tyvek to make Tyvek epoxy tubing. Not as good as carbon fiber, but a lot cheaper. Anyway, see what they look like tomorrow when they have full 12, 15 hours to cure. And I'll put those results in another video.